Welcome, friends, to the event acknowledging the 25th anniversary, approximately, of USDA-supported food security measurement, answered questions, and further research. This is the final conference for a small grants program supported by USDA, acknowledging these 25 years of scientific survey-based food security measurement. The grantees that we'll hear from today submitted proposals in February 2021. Then there's this conference in April 2022. They'll be submitting manuscripts with some improvement based on the discussion today in August 2022. And then approximately 6 months later or 8 months later, we'll have a special issue with these manuscripts, probably from the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, or JAND. I've got a series of thanks to offer for support for many people who contributed to this event, but the first of them is Irma Arteaga, my co-organizer at University of Missouri, who will say a word of greeting.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Irma Arteaga. I'm an applied economist and an associate professor at the School of Public Affairs at the University of Missouri. I am very happy to be here today co-hosting this amazing event. We are celebrating the 25th anniversary of the U.S. food security measure. During this celebration, we are going to reflect on the history of the measure, the instruments used, and opportunities. Today, we're going to hear from our grantees how the measure can be narrowed or expanded to measure food insecurity or food security only for individuals, specific demographic groups, where culture needs to be taken into account, or for specific events like disasters, or a specific social context like a structural violence. We have an exciting program today. Thank you again for joining us.
Among the many people to thank, especially is partners at USDA's Economic Research Service and Food and Nutrition Service, which have had a long-standing partnership guiding the federal government through how it measures food insecurity and hunger in the United States. At ERS, we thank Alicia Coleman-Jensen, Christian Gregory, Matthew Rabbit, Laura Tian, and Administrator Spiro Stefanou, who will be giving comments and welcome in a couple minutes. At the Food and Nutrition Service, Anita Singh, Melissa Abilev, Leslie Hodges, Andrew Burns, and Michael Burke had different roles and contributions to this project. Our advisory committee includes Rafael Perez Escamilla, Judy Bartlett, James Ziliak, Catherine Alimo, and this advisory committee provided both mentorship to some of the grantees and also help in selecting them. The three discussants today include Mariana Chilton from Drexel University, Hilary Seligman from San Francisco, and Will Masters, my colleague here at Tufts University. I also want to thank at Tufts University, Sarah Rolke-Van Ness for research assistance and management of this event, and also earlier Ian Moore and Sarah Weimer. The history, Irma will be talking in a little bit as part of a setting the stage paper about the history of food security measurement in the United States. But I was reflecting over the weekend in preparing for this event on the history of this type of conference, because there's really been a series of conferences that have served as the forum for discussing how the federal government should best assess what is going on with food-related hardship in the United States. The first of these conferences was in 1994, and it strongly influenced the design of the first food security measurement on the current population survey. But the first that I attended was in 1999. So that's now quite a while ago. And some of the personalities involved included Susan Mayer before she became Dean of the Harris School at the University of Chicago, Angus Deaton before he earned his Nobel Prize, Richard Bavier from Office of Management and Budget, who stood out for a critical perspective, not taking for granted that the way things were already being measured was the right way to do it. Colleagues like Craig Gunderson, Catherine Alimo, who's on our advisory board, Christine Olson at Cornell University, Lynn Parker from FRAC, Helen Jensen, myself early in my career, Gary Bickle and Mark Nord, who are two of the longstanding people who designed food security measurement. And so at some point, the people in the room today may sort of be remembered for the conversation that we have at this time, reflecting on what's gone well and what things merit changing in the years to come. After that meeting in 1999, there was an interagency working group, a partnership of several federal agencies, and they set several themes that are still influencing us today, and that you'll sort of hear even in this conference these years later. They discussed the need for understanding food insecurity on an individual basis as well as a household basis, and you'll see that this is related to one of our grantees' presentations by Rebar and Aranda. They talked about food insecurity in both adults and children, and we'll hear a presentation from Ana Poblacion on related topics. They talked about nutrition quality, which is related to the issues of the day. I'm currently in the news with a major presentation by Secretary Vilsack on nutrition security. They discussed the need for making sure that the measure works well with particular populations. And today we have presentations by McLean and colleagues on Hispanic and Latinx populations, and Cassandra Nicolas Nguyen on Native American and American Indian populations. We're giving more attention to some topics than was done in 1999, including racial justice and structural violence. We'll have a presentation by Chelsea Singleton, and disaster settings. They did not anticipate a coronavirus pandemic at the time. So there's things that have changed in our old lives that were not anticipated years in advance. And Lauren Clay will be talking about food security measurement, especially suitable for disaster settings. Let me say a word about the format for our discussion. I think there's about 250 people registered. So this webinar format, for all the disadvantages and for all the sadness that we're not able to share a meal in a room together, does have some advantages in terms of access and number of people who can participate and be involved in the conversation. The meeting will be recorded. We'll release recordings on the project website afterwards. I should add, this conference represents the work of the authors and may not represent the opinions and policies of Tufts University or the USDA, and that standard caveat is true for all of the presentations today. You'll see that during this, we'll use the morning session as an example, that there will be a series of papers. For example, in this morning session, there will be 3 papers, and then a discussant. Hilary Seligman will be our first discussant. Then there'll be a question and answer time and a break. And so that format will follow through the day. For the public participants, please readily use the Q&A link. We'll be monitoring what comes in through that with great interest. Feel free to send in questions. You don't have to worry about interrupting anybody. Send in the questions as soon, or comments as soon as they occur to you. And the moderator for each of these 3 sessions today, also for the other panelists, panelists are welcome to participate even in the session that isn't the one where their paper is being presented. And so just drop a chat note to or a Q&A note to the moderator for that session. And the moderator, if it's suitable, will call on people and we can get a breadth of voices in each of these sessions. So my last task is to introduce USDA's Economic Research Service Administrator, Spiro Stefanou. And this is a great pleasure because Spiro is one of the leading agricultural economists. He was previously a professor at Penn State University and at the University of Florida. And he's one of the world's top experts on how firms, especially in the food system, adopt effective technologies. He's a distinguished fellow of the Agricultural and Applied Economics Association and has been the past editor of both of the association's leading journals. And he has too many other recognitions for me to list here at the start of this conference. At USDA's Economic Research Service, he oversees a team of hundreds of social scientists in one of the federal government's most important economics agencies, focused on the economics of agriculture, natural resources, and the food system. So it is highly suitable for this particular conference to welcome Dr. Stefanou to greet this conference.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Parke. That was a very overly generous introduction. And you mentioned the early generation that started this whole process, this whole research direction, and it's heartening to see the next generation stepping up. And we should be seeing a Nobel Prize given in this area in the near future. I firmly believe that. Well, I'd like to welcome and thank you all for joining us today. We at ERS are excited to hear the findings from these new research projects that will inform and advance ERS's U.S. food security measurement, research, and data program. ERS and our sister agency, the Food and Nutrition Service, have been measuring food insecurity in U.S. households since 1995. As we approach 25 years of monitoring food security in U.S. households in 2019, ERS research staff believed it was important to take a critical look at our survey questionnaire and measurement methods to ensure that our data and findings continue to be policy relevant as well as scientifically rigorous. ERS management was more than happy to fund these research endeavors. The mission of USDA's Economic Research Service is to anticipate trends and emerging issues in agriculture, food, the environment, and rural America, and to conduct high-quality, objective economic research to inform and enhance public and private decision-making. ERS's annual report, Household Food Security in the United States, is the most visited report on our website. The annual report and related data development and research are excellent examples of not only meeting our mission, but going beyond to promote scientific rigor. ERS also has a long history of investing in critical reviews and analysis of our U.S. food security research program. ERS is a leader in guiding U.S. food security analysis through our data development and data investments, as well as ongoing research. In 2003 to 2006, an expert panel convened by the Committee on National Statistics of the National Academies conducted a thorough review of the food security measurement methods, and USDA requested this review to ensure the measurement methods USDA uses to assess households' access and lack of access to adequate food and language to adequate food and the language used to describe those conditions are scientifically sound, and they convey useful and relevant information to policy officials and the public. ERS responded and implemented some changes recommended by the panel, and we have continued to conduct research internally and in partnership with academic researchers on potential enhancements to the food security measure and measurement methods. In recognition of approaching 25 years of data collection, we invested in an expert review of our current population survey food security supplement questionnaire and cognitive interviewing of revised survey questions in 2019. We also partnered with the Census Bureau to implement a split panel study to test revised survey items in September of 2020. Today's presentations represent another ERS investment as we funded a suite of competitive grants through a collaborative research program that Parke mentioned titled 25 Years of Food Security Measurement, Answered Questions and Further Research. The purpose of the program was to foster research related to the past 25 years of U.S. household food security research and to explore feasible evidence-based improvements looking forward. We wanted to get the best ideas we could from researchers outside of USDA. Selection and coordination of research projects has been managed through a collaboration between Tufts University and the University of Missouri, and we are thankful for the able leadership of Drs. Parke Wilde and Irma Arteaga. This work is important, as evidenced by the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, speaking often about food and nutrition security as the country continues to grapple with food and nutrition-related challenges related to the pandemic and inflation. I mentioned previously the important collaborations we developed with other federal agencies within USDA and across the federal government, such as USDA's Food and Nutrition Service, the US Census Bureau, the National Center for Health Statistics, and others. ERS's work on food insecurity benefits immensely from these collaborations, and we could not have done what we've done or continue to move forward without these important partnerships. In particular, I want to acknowledge the investments made by FNS in data collections that include food security measures such as food apps and the National Health Survey, National Health Interview Survey, as well as others. FNS's investments and collaborations have helped to move the food security research field forward. We certainly look forward to continuing to collaborate with FNS and other agencies. And while I'm here, I'd like to let you know about some other ERS work. ERS has just launched a new webinar series focused on our data. These data training webinars will help you learn to find ERS data. We also launched a mobile app for our popular charts of note. This will give you access to thousands of ERS charts on topics across the spectrum of what we do. And finally, ERS's Food Economics Division has another research funding opportunity that will open this week. It's the Consumer Food Data System Grant Competition for Food and Health Research, and is funded by the generous support of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and is co-sponsored by ERS, which is facilitating data access. This grant competition is for researchers who will use one or more restricted use data assets in USDA's consumer food data system. What you will all discuss today may spur ideas for that grant competition's call for proposals. And as I conclude, I would like to thank ERS researchers Alicia Coleman-Jensen, Christian Gregory, and Matt Rabbit for conceiving and organizing this very timely conference. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your support in this area, in this important area of work. Our first presentation is by Irma Arteaga from University of Missouri.
Good morning, everybody. For those who just joined us, my name is Irma Arteaga. I'm at the University of Missouri at the School of Public Affairs, and I'm very happy to be here today to talk about an overview for measuring food security in the US, highlighting its history, methods, some key findings, and opportunities for research, practice, and policy. This is joint work with Parke, who is my co-host today. So let's start with a background. Since 1995, USDA has used Census Bureau data to scientifically estimate annual prevalence of household food security. The federal government uses food security surveys to monitor national progress towards reducing food insecurity and to evaluate federal nutrition assistance programs. For the monitoring process, there is a tension between focus and scope. That is, a tension between having a single authoritative measurement approach and incorporating multiple tools or instruments suitable for diverse populations, contexts, and applications. For the program evaluation purpose, challenges include coordination with a study design capable of real causal estimates in the face of strong self-selection effects and tailored reference periods in survey questions that match the timing of program participation. So a food security measure should satisfy several criteria. First, suitability for national program monitoring. Second, suitability for impact evaluation of nutritional assistance programs. Third, appropriateness for diverse population. Fourth, closeness in meaning to the intended conceptual definition. And fifth, sufficient simplicity for high impact government uses. So we should think about all these criteria when reflecting about our food security measure. So while this piece is mostly a review of the literature about the food security measure, conceptualization, the tools, and findings, this review provided us an opportunity to think about what lessons may guide future innovations to measure national progress and to evaluate the effectiveness of nutrition assistance programs. So let me start by briefly talking a little bit about history. So both Parke and Spiro have actually talked about it. So I'm just going to highlight a few items. So the USDA food security measure was created after Congress passed the National Nutrition Monitoring and Related Research Act of 1990. In 1994, participants at the National Conference of Food Security Measurement and Research conceptually defined food security and recommended an approach to scientifically measure food security using a national survey. Because of that, in 1995, the first National Representative Food Insecurity Survey was administered by the US Census Bureau via supplemental model to the current population survey. Then an independent evaluation determined the stability of the food security measure for the period 1995-1997. And since 1997, CPS, the current population survey, has collected food security data annually. In addition to that, this technical report also found that scaling techniques justify 3 thresholds and 4 food security categories. Food secure, food insecure with hunger not evident, food insecure with moderate hunger, and food insecure with severe hunger. We also know that the wording of food security questions has not changed much since 1995. Something that happened in 1998 was that the 6-item food security scale was developed. Another thing that I want to highlight is that in 2006, USDA consulted with the Committee on National Statistics of the National Academies, and based on the recommendations, the level of the 4 food security status categories were changed to high food security, marginal food security, low food security, and very low food security. So the first 2 categories refer to food security, and the last 2 categories indicated food insecurity. The term hunger was removed from the category labels because hunger might result from food insecurity, and measuring hunger requires detailed and extensive information on physiological experiences of each household members. So let me now turn into conceptual definitions. USDA defines household food security as having access at all times to enough food for an active, healthy life for all households members. Households that are not food secure may be called food insecure. And these food insecure households may be subclassified as having low or very low food insecurity. It is important to mention that in operational practice, the USDA definition cannot really address whether the household member's food intake was sufficient for an active, healthy life. So now I'm going to present a few slides about instruments. The US household food security model consists of 18 questions, 10 items asked to all households and 8 additional items asked to households with children. Raw scores is the number of affirmative responses to the binary survey items, which has a summative interpretation and a latent variable interpretation. The figure in this slide comes from data corresponding to the 2020 current population survey, food security supplement model. We're showing here the 3 household items plus the 7 adult items. So households without children only answer these 10 items. So for example, in 2020, we observed that 14% of all households and 20% of households with children worried food would run out. 11% of all households and 15% of households with children saw that food they both didn't last. So these are just a few items. So this slide shows the 8-child item of this model. So for example, 13% of households with children relied on few kinds of low-cost food to feed their children, and 8% of households could not feed their children with balanced meals, to cite just a few of these items. So one interesting question to ask is how to classify food security status in households with children. So households could be considered food insecure if either adults or children or both were classified as food insecure. Or households could be considered food insecure if the 10 households and adult reference items are classified as food insecure. So research actually shows the strengths and weaknesses for each of these options. Another issue that seems to be relevant when thinking about the second purpose of a food security measure, that is, evaluate federal nutrition assistance programs, is the issue of 12 months versus 30 days measure. Most national representative data sets only use the 12-month measure. However, participants enter and exit federal nutrition assistance programs from month to month. Because of that, an alternative measure with a shorter reference time period is more useful for program evaluation purposes. So when thinking about instruments, another topic to consider is the use of shorter instruments. So for example, some advantages of using shorter instruments are the decreased respondent burden and minimal bias compared to longer versions. Some disadvantages are that they do not measure the most severe levels of food security. They are less precise than the 18-item questionnaire, and they do not ask questions regarding children in the household. An example of a 2-item model is the one used by the Hunger Vital Signs. An example of the 6-item model is the one developed by the National Center for Health Statistics and is used typically in clinical settings and also in national health surveys. Other instruments that are out there that are used is, for example, the Household Pulse Survey that uses a shorter household food security measure with a short 7-day reference period incorporated in a large, more general survey. An important tool used to determine items and wording in the food security measure is cognitive testing. Cognitive interviews are widely used to pre-test survey instruments to identify comprehension and response problems. So, for example, the term balanced meals might depend on cultural contexts. So for Hawaiian populations, it has been suggested a variation of this term. So instead of using balanced meals, it has been suggested to use healthy and varied diet or nutritional meals. For US Latino immigrants, a study suggests changing response options never for hardly ever, because Latinos don't like ever saying never. There has also been limited cognitive testing of the household food security model in languages other than English in the US. So it seems relevant to do that. So next, I'm going to talk about analysis tools. Decisions about the raw score thresholds for food security status classification draw on scaling tools from item response theory, including the RASH model. The RASH model is similar to a logistic regression model, showing the log odds of affirmative response to the survey items as a function of the severity of the item and a food security scale score for the household. With the RASH model, the raw score, that is the number of affirmative responses, is a sufficient statistics for the underlying food security scale score. This means that one can use the raw score to determine the food security scale score without needing other information about which questions were answered affirmatively. That is a key advantage because it's straightforward to interpret. Prior research shows that severity of survey items differ in households with children and households without children, which might be a violation of one of the assumptions of the RASH model. However, alternative IRT models present additional difficulties in estimation and ease of explanation. And also some research have shown that using these alternative models produce very similar results to the ones produced by the RASH model. In addition to that, validation of the household food security model suggests that, for example, males, minorities, Spanish-speaking households respond to questions differently than other households. So something that remains unknown is whether they understand questions differently or whether they experience food-related hardship differently. So at the beginning of the presentation, I stated that there are two main reasons to examine the official US food security measure: to monitor progress and to evaluate federal nutrition assistance programs. So since 1995, food security data has been consistently and scientifically collected in the US every year. So there are different types of studies. So some that describe reports of annual food security, some studies that address important policy questions, such as what are the effects of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act on food security? How do changes in SNAP benefit size during the COVID pandemic has affected food security? And there are also studies regarding food security for vulnerable populations, for example, elderly, immigrants, children, or women. So in the case of evaluation of food assistance programs, there is a vast literature that examines the effects of federal nutrition assistance programs on food insecurity. And this includes effects on SNAP, on WIC, on NSLP. And there are also other studies that include a combination of different federal assistance programs and the effect on food security. And studies use a variety of methods that are not limited to fixed effects, instrumental variable models, regression discontinuity, and difference in difference models. And most of you who are joining us today in this call are probably the authors of some of these pieces. So when reviewing this literature about food security measure tools and its application, Parke and I reflected on 5 key topics. So the first one is, what are the comparative merits of focusing on primary authoritative 12-month food security measure versus more varied measures for distinct population and purposes? In the first case, a 12-month measure is useful as a high-profile indicator of national progress towards food security goals and food cross-sectional comparison. More varied measures are useful for distinct populations with diverse experience of food-related hardship, or for evaluating particular interventions and programs that may influence some dimensions of food security more than others. A substantial challenge with more varied measures is comparability of the level of hardship. The threshold for being classified as food insecure may be different to interpret when different measures are based on different underlying survey questions. So the second topic is, how much should the definition of food security be broadened? For example, we can think about a couple of additional definitions, such as nutrition security, which focus on experiences associated with risk of chronic disease with implied policy responses offering more specific nutrition benefits. Or we can think about another definition like human rights and social justice, which provide more comprehensive policy responses to deeper social challenges. All of this, of course, depends on how the food security measure is used, to monitor national progress or to evaluate federal programs. So the third topic that we reflected on is whether high-profile prevalence statistics are best interpreted as summaries of experiences of food-related hardship or as estimates for latent variables within IRT framework. So some influential sources, such as the annual USDA food security report, that makes little references to IRT models. And when prevalence statistics are interpreted as summaries of the food security survey items, the estimates do not depend on the specific assumptions of statistical models used for the analysis. Other sources consider estimated scores for a latent food security variable to be the fundamental objective of food security measurement. Such estimates are derived from comparability of simple statistics models, such as the RASH model, or more complex models with the broadened IRT, within the broadened IRT family of models. The first topic for discussion is what are options for assessing the severity or depth of food security. One option is to emphasize the raw score. This approach works equally well whether analysts interpret the raw score as merely a summary of several survey items or within the RASH model framework as a representation of the underlying food security latent variable. As another option is to directly focus on the latent food insecurity variable within the framework, either of the RASH model or a more complex IRT model, each of which has strengths and limitations. And an additional option can be to emphasize the frequency and timing of experiences of hardship. For example, making greater use of questions about whether the hardship was experienced never, sometimes, or often. This last approach will involve changes from current practices. And finally, topic for discussion can be, in what ways can survey instruments be shortened for effective use in time-constrained interview settings? So heavier use of a short food security or food sufficiency measure would go well with a narrow focus rather than broadening the concept of food security to encompass new issues, thinking of prevalence statistics as a simple summary of experiences of hardship rather than an accurate measure of a latent variable in an IRT framework, or using frequency of experiences of hardship rather than a range of items affirmed as the best way of assessing severity. So in closing, I would like to say that we have a very exciting program today, and some of the talks will address some of these issues mentioned in this discussion. And we will have time at the end to share perspective about these and other topics that we believe are relevant to think about our food security measure. Thank you very much.